Hey guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about bearded dragons going off food as my son Cheese in the background there eats her crickets. So I've seen a lot of questions and such on forums asking why your dragon or their dragon has gone off food, it's not eating, etc. So a lot of the times it's an easy fix, but I'll just be going over some of the reasons why your dragon may go off food. So the first reason is lights. Now lights is the most important thing to have when you're keeping reptiles, just in general, because that's their entire life. That's basically their life support. Without proper lighting, your dragon may stop eating. So as you know, they're cold-blooded, so they need to have heat to metabolize or to get a higher metabolism to, in order to digest their food. So with a low metabolism, they won't be able to digest their food. So you want to make sure that the basking temperature is nice and warm for them. So a good temperature to have is 104 Fahrenheit to 110 Fahrenheit, the basking temperature, the basking spot temperature, measured with a digital thermometer, which is the air temperature, not the surface temperature. So you want to make sure it's nice and warm. If it's not warm enough, again, as I said, they won't be able to digest their food properly, and that will cause them to go off food. So the next thing to look at, if your heating is fine, is the UVB. So are you using a coil UVB or are you using a linear tube UVB? As you can see, I have a linear tube UVB. You always want to make sure you have a linear tube or a longer tube that covers at least 2/3 of the tank, because without proper UVB, your dragon won't be able to metabolize calcium properly, and they just won't feel as good. They won't have enough vitamin D, and basically it's like us. Without nice sunshine, sometimes we just aren't feeling that well, and the same thing goes for dragons. UVB is really important for their health. So without that, they can also go off food. The reason why you don't want to use a coil UVB, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's because it doesn't give out enough UVB for them, and it's not, they can't choose whether they want UVB and heat, because usually they are kept together. With a linear UVB, your dragon can decide on how much UVB it wants and how much heat it wants and stuff like that. So also, when you have a UVB tube, you want to make sure it's not covered. So as you can see, mine, I cut a hole in the mesh. You want to make sure either it's not on mesh, it's attached underneath with zip ties or Velcro, or it's not blocked by anything. So the next thing to look into, a lot of people don't realize, but it's parasites. So it's always good to have take your dragon to the vet every 6 months or so to check that there's no parasites, because sometimes when your dragon has parasites, it's not feeling well and it won't eat. So a lot of the times your dragons may get parasites from their feeder insects. Now, before everyone freaks out and like, oh, crickets, you're feeding crickets, a lot of people do tell others that crickets are the worst food to feed because they always have parasites. Now, that is false. That's people only it's more of a stereotype, because crickets are the most fed feeder insect in the entire world because they're most readily available. So a lot of the times people just point fingers at crickets because that's what most people feed. So you should always make sure that your feeder insects are kept in a good environment and healthy. You want to make sure they're clean, they have fresh food, there's no dead carcasses everywhere and stuff like that. And you also want to make sure you're getting them from a good area. But other than that, there's not much you can do. Just make sure you get your dragon to vet to get their fecal exam done. If your dragon does have parasites, your vet will give you some medication for your dragon to take, and once your dragon is better, it most likely will start eating on its own again. The next thing is brumation. So brumation is kind of confusing for beginners, especially if you don't really know what it is. So it's basically like a hibernation state for dragons. They just kind of go into a sleep state when it gets kind of cold, and they'll wake up when it's a bit warmer. They do that naturally. It's completely normal. Some dragons brumate, some dragons don't. So if your dragon does seem like it's, kind of sleeping more and stuff like that, I would always recommend taking it to the vet to get a fecal exam done, because you don't want your dragon to sleep with a bunch of parasites in its body. Kind of obvious, because, slowly drain their nutrition. So it's always good to get a fecal exam before, and it's also, if you don't know if your dragon is going to brumation or not, you can also ask your vet on that. Another reason why your dragon might go off food is because of the lack of variety. So you want to make sure you're feeding your dragons different feeder insects. So you don't want to just feed crickets for their entire life. You can, throw a few superworms, a few butterworms. Those are quite fatty, so I wouldn't recommend it too much. You can throw in a bit of mealworms, a bit of that excessive amount of chitin is fine. You can also throw in some silkworms. Silkworms are really good. Black soldier-fly larvae are really good. They're also known as calciworms and nutri-grubs and stuff like that. There's a lot of names, but they're basically just a larvae of a fly. There's a bunch. There's also hornworms. You can feed a bit of those. Those are really watery, so I wouldn't feed too much. You can feed, isopods like woodlouse or lice or pill bugs and stuff like that. Let's see, what else? There's also waxworms, which are also kind of fatty, but you can feed those as well. So a variety will ensure that your dragon continues to eat, because sometimes they're just bored of their food. You can get different types of the same insect, such as different types of crickets or different type of roaches. You can also get, just different varieties like that. It's good to add more variety for your dragon's diet anyways, because it keeps them healthier. And the last thing that may cause your dragon to go off food is their age. So some of the older dragons may go off food for, pretty obvious reasons. They're old, they're not feeling that well, and they don't really want to eat too much. So you can't really do anything about that. Just, let your dragon choose. When they do get older, they do start slowing down, and there isn't really much you can do about that. But everything else that I mentioned before, you can do, and it's a pretty easy fix. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helped. And yeah, I don't have much to say at this point.